a world of ice and giants. To understand the daily life of our earliest ancestors, we must first step into their world. It was a world fundamentally different from our own, a planet in the grip of the Pleistocene epoch, a time of profound and often violent environmental instability. This was not a static backdrop for the human story. It was an active, formidable character, the primary antagonist and catalyst in our evolution. For over 2 million years, the Earth's climate was governed by the Milankovitch cycles, subtle, predictable wobbles in its orbit around the sun that plunged the globe into long, bitter ice ages, followed by brief, warmer interglacials. In every generation, early humans faced the existential problem of how to endure. The line between thriving and extinction was defined not by simple strength, but by the ability to adjust to the relentless uncertainties of a world shifting between glacial and temperate, arid and rainy. This epic drama of survival played out across the vast timeline of the Paleolithic, or Old Stone Age. Our focus is on the latter acts of this period, the Middle Paleolithic, spanning roughly 300,000 to 50,000 years before present BP, and the Upper Paleolithic from about 50,000 to 12,000 years BP. This was not a monolithic Stone Age, but a dynamic era of immense biological and cultural change, a time when the very definition of what it meant to be human was being forged in the crucible of adaptation. The protagonists of our story are anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens. The fossil record tells us our species emerged in Africa around 300,000 years ago, with the oldest known remains found at Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, a site that revealed modern-looking faces paired with more archaic, elongated brain cases. Other crucial early fossils from sites like Florisbad in South Africa, c. 259,000 BP, and Omokibish in Ethiopia, c. 195,000 to 233,000 BP, paint a picture not of a single Garden of Eden, but of a complex, continent-wide genesis. Diverse groups of human ancestors, living in habitable pockets across Africa, evolved in relative isolation until those dramatic climate shifts spurred them to mix, swapping everything from genes to tool technologies. This process of intermingling eventually gave rise to the unique genetic makeup of all modern humans. But our ancestors were not alone. When they began their great migration out of Africa between 60,000 and 50,000 years ago, they stepped onto a world stage already occupied by other kinds of humans. In the cold grasslands and forests of Europe and the Middle East, they met the Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, a robust and highly intelligent hominin species that had thrived there for hundreds of thousands of years. In the vast expanses of Asia, they encountered the Denisovans, a more mysterious branch of the human family known to us primarily through their DNA. The story of the Upper Paleolithic is the story of these interactions, of competition, coexistence, and interbreeding that would ultimately see Homo sapiens become the last human species on Earth. This sets the stage for our central question. What was it truly like to wake up each day in this world of ice and giants? The daily challenges were fundamental and relentless. It was a life defined by the constant, pressing need to find food, to stay warm, to avoid being eaten by predators far larger and more powerful than oneself, to raise vulnerable children to adulthood, and to navigate an increasingly complex social world. To deconstruct a typical day in the life of an early Homo sapiens, we must explore the pillars of their existence. The relentless pursuit of survival, the intricate fabric of their social lives, and the dawning of a modern consciousness in their inner world. The greatest daily challenge was not any single predator, but the ever-changing environment itself. It was the ultimate driver of migration, of technological invention, and of the very cognitive and social flexibility that allowed our ancestors to not only survive, but to eventually conquer the planet. To provide a clear framework for the immense timescale and complex developments we will discuss, the following table summarizes the key phases of the later Paleolithic. During the Middle Paleolithic/Mousterian period, which lasted from approximately 300,000 to 50,000 years before present BP, the key hominins present were Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens. Major technological innovations from this period included the Levallois prepared core technique, the use of flake tools, and the fire hardening of wood. Symbolic behavior is evidenced by the use of red ochre at pinnacle point around 165,000 BP, shell beads found in Morocco dating to around 82,000 BP, and early human burials at sites such as Kafsa and Skull. The Upper Paleolithic/Aurignacian period, dating from around 45,000 to 29,000 BP, was marked by the presence of early modern humans, also known as Cro-Magnon and late Neanderthals. This period saw the emergence of blade-based tools, tools made from bone and antler, and the first undisputed examples of figurative art. Key examples of symbolic behavior and art from this time include cave paintings in Chauvet Cave, around 32,000 BP, and Venus figurines such as those from Hol Fels, around 35,000 BP. In the Upper Paleolithic/Gravettian period, which lasted from about 29,000 to 22,000 BP, modern humans continued to innovate. Technologies developed during this period include eyed needles, nets, and early ceramics in the form of fired clay figurines. Symbolic behavior is illustrated by Venus figurines like the Venus of Willendorf and the Venus of Dolny Vestinus, as well as elaborate burials such as those found at Sungir. The Upper Paleolithic/Solutrean period, spanning approximately 22,000 to 18,000 BP, was also dominated by modern humans. This period is notable for the production of finely worked, leaf-shaped stone points created using a technique known as pressure flaking. Symbolic behavior from this period is represented by highly refined stone tools and bas-relief sculptures such as those found at Roc de Surs. Finally, during the Upper Paleolithic/Magdalenian period, which ranged from about 17,000 to 11,000 BP, modern humans developed barbed harpoons and began to widely use the spear thrower or atlotl. This period marks the peak of Paleolithic cave art, with notable sites including Lascaux and Altamira. It also saw the production of intricate carvings made from bone and ivory. Part 1. The relentless pursuit surviving the day. The rhythm of Paleolithic life was dictated by the stomach. Every day was a cycle of energy expenditure in the pursuit of energy acquisition. This relentless quest for calories shaped their bodies, their tools, their social structures, and their understanding of the world. It was a life of intense physical activity, moving across vast landscapes to tap into the fluctuating resources of the natural world. The journey begins at dawn, with the band stirring and facing the first and most fundamental question: what will we eat today? The morning foray, the world as a larder. The popular image of the caveman as a mighty hunter, subsisting almost entirely on mammoth steaks, is a dramatic but misleading caricature. While hunting was undeniably crucial, the foundation of the Paleolithic diet, for most groups in most places, was built on the patient and knowledgeable exploitation of the plant world. Archaeological evidence, from isotopic analysis of skeletal remains to microscopic plant residues found on ancient tools and in the dental calculus of Neanderthals and early humans, reveals a diet that was incredibly varied and often heavily reliant on plants. In warmer climates, plant foods likely provided the majority of the daily caloric intake, offering a more reliable, if less concentrated, source of energy than the high-risk, high-reward gamble of the hunt. This was not simple gathering. It was a highly skilled, technologically assisted, and cognitively demanding practice. To survive, a forager needed an encyclopedic, multi-generational knowledge of the local ecosystem. They knew which plants were edible, which were poisonous, and, most importantly, which could be made edible through processing. Their larder included a vast array of wild fruits, berries, nuts, and seeds. Critically, they targeted energy-dense underground storage organs, USOs, or tubers, the wild ancestors of modern carrots, parsnips, and potatoes, which provided a vital source of carbohydrates. This knowledge extended far beyond food. The local flora was also a pharmacy and a hardware store. Evidence from Neanderthal sites dating back 60,000 years shows the use of plants like yarrow, known for its anti-inflammatory properties, suggesting a sophisticated medicinal understanding. Plants provided raw materials for bedding, fibers for making baskets and nets, and fuel for the all-important hearth. Acquiring and preparing these resources required a specialized toolkit. Early humans used sharp-edged stone tools to dig for roots and cut plants, and, by the Upper Paleolithic, they were using grinding stones to process wild grass seeds and nuts into a form of flour. The discovery of grinding slabs near fireplaces at sites like Shizitan in China, dating to around 23,000 years ago, shows a long tradition of processing a wide variety of plants, including wild millets, beans, and yams. The true sophistication of this practice, however, lies in the cognitive processes it reveals. This was not a simple act of picking and eating. It was a complex technology, a sequence of planned actions, what archaeologists call a chaîne opératoire, that demonstrates abstract and procedural knowledge. Evidence from Franchthai Cave in Greece and Shanidar Cave in Iraq shows that as far back as 70,000 years ago, early humans were gathering plants like wild vetches and legumes. These plants are naturally bitter and contain toxins that can cause stomach upset. Yet, the charred food remains found at these sites show they had been soaked, pounded, and cooked. This is a multi-step detoxification process. It implies an understanding of cause and effect. This bitter taste signals potential harm, a learned procedure for mitigating that harm, and the ability to transmit this complex knowledge across generations. They were not just gathering food. They were transforming inedible resources into sustenance. This intellectual achievement, requiring memory, planning, and communication, was a major driver of cognitive development, fundamentally challenging the old model that placed hunting as the sole engine of human ingenuity. The Great Hunt, stalking the megafauna. While plants provided the steady baseline of the diet, the Great Hunt offered the promise of a massive caloric windfall. The Pleistocene world was a landscape of giants, a world teeming with megafauna that have since vanished from the earth. Herds of woolly mammoths and steppe bison thundered across the grasslands. Woolly rhinoceroses browsed in the cold scrub, and the enormous antlers of the giant deer, Megaloceros, flashed through the forests. These animals were a source of immense reward. Meat, fat, marrow, hides, and bone. But they were also a source of profound danger. Stalking this world were formidable predators like the cave lion, the scimitar-toothed cat, Homotherium, and the massive short-faced bear, all of which competed with humans and posed a mortal threat. To face this world, humans developed an ever more sophisticated toolkit of weapons. During the Middle Paleolithic, the primary weapon was the thrusting spear, a simple but effective tool often consisting of a fire-hardened wooden shaft, sometimes tipped with a stone point. Hunting with these weapons was a dangerous, close-quarters affair, requiring hunters to get within striking distance of powerful and aggressive animals. The high incidence of traumatic injuries found on Neanderthal skeletons, similar to those seen in modern rodeo riders, attests to the risks of these close encounters. The Upper Paleolithic saw a technological revolution that changed the calculus of the hunt. The key innovation was projectile weaponry, which allowed hunters to strike from a safer distance with greater force. The most significant of these was the spear thrower, or atlatl. This device, essentially a stick with a hook at one end, acted as a lever to extend the hunter's arm, dramatically increasing the velocity and range of a thrown spear. A hand-thrown spear might be effective up to about 6 meters, but an atlatl could launch a dart with lethal force up to 40 meters or more. This was a game-changer. The bow and arrow also made their appearance during this time. While their use became widespread later, the oldest known stone arrowheads, found in South Africa, date back an astonishing 70,000 years, indicating a very deep history for this technology. Even with these advanced weapons, hunting megafauna was a formidable challenge. A recent and compelling theory suggests that for the largest and most dangerous prey, early humans employed a strategy of remarkable ingenuity and courage: pike hunting. Instead of actively throwing or thrusting their valuable spears and risking their loss or destruction, hunters may have planted them firmly in the ground, sharp tip angled upwards, in the path of a charging animal. By taunting the beast into a charge, they could use its own weight and momentum to cause a fatal impalement. This clever tactic would generate far more force than a human arm ever could, enough to pierce the thick hide and bone of a mammoth or bison, and it speaks volumes about our ancestors' capacity for problem-solving and their understanding of basic physics. Taking down such animals was almost never a solo endeavor. It was a profoundly social and cooperative act that reveals the complexity of Paleolithic social cognition. Archaeological evidence from a 300,000-year-old site at Schöningen, Germany, shows that hominins were already conducting highly organized, communal hunts of wild horses. These were likely large-scale operations involving the entire able-bodied community, men, women, and older children, working together to drive herds into natural traps like marshes or cliffs, where they could be dispatched by a smaller group of hunters. Such an undertaking required sophisticated communication to coordinate actions, a shared goal that individuals had to maintain, a deep understanding of animal behavior, and a high degree of trust among participants. The social implications were enormous. The success of the hunt depended on group cohesion, and its aftermath necessitated established rules for sharing the massive bounty of meat, reinforcing the social bonds that held the community together. Of course, life was not a constant mammoth hunt. The Paleolithic diet was a broad-spectrum one. Depending on the location and season, humans hunted a wide variety of smaller game, from wild goats and reindeer in the north to rabbits and birds. In coastal and riverine environments, fishing was a major activity, with evidence for specialized barbed harpoons and fishhooks appearing in the archaeological record. The work was not finished when the animal fell. The carcass had to be processed quickly to prevent spoilage and predation by scavengers. Zooarchaeological evidence shows that butchery was systematic. The animal was immediately bled, eviscerated, and dismembered at the kill site. Only the most valuable, transportable parts would be carried back to the main camp. The hide, a resource nearly as valuable as the meat, would be carefully removed and later processed using stone scrapers to be made into clothing, shelter, and cordage. This entire process, from the creation of the weapon to the final distribution of the meat, illustrates a powerful interdependence between technology and social structure. The shift from close-quarters thrusting spears to long-range projectile weapons likely did more than just make hunting safer. It may have reshaped society itself. Where mass participation mob hunting might have been the norm, the atlatl and bow could have enabled smaller, more specialized hunting parties, perhaps leading to new social roles and statuses. A more reliable return from these more effective technologies would, in turn, have strengthened the importance of the base camp as a central place of distribution and sharing, further cementing the cooperative foundations of Paleolithic society. The hearth, the heart of the camp. At the end of a long day of foraging and hunting, all paths led back to one place: the hearth. The mastery of fire was arguably the single most important technological achievement in human evolution, a discovery that fundamentally re-engineered our ancestors' relationship with the world. While hominins may have made opportunistic use of natural fires for over 1 million years, the evidence for the habitual, controlled use of fire within constructed hearths becomes widespread and undeniable from around 400,000 to 300,000 years ago, a technology mastered by both Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens. The Paleolithic hearth was far more than a simple campfire. It was a multifunctional utility at the very center of daily life. Its most obvious benefits were warmth and light. The ability to create a pocket of warmth in a cold world was what allowed humans to push out of the tropical climates of Africa and survive the harsh winters of temperate and even subarctic regions, a critical factor in our species' eventual global expansion. Light extended the usable day into the darkness of night, transforming a time of danger and inactivity into a time for social connection and productivity. The fire was also the group's primary defense, a flickering barrier that kept formidable nocturnal predators at bay. Perhaps most profoundly, the hearth became the first kitchen. The act of cooking transformed the human diet. It breaks down tough fibers and complex proteins, making food more digestible and unlocking significantly more calories and nutrients than can be obtained from raw food. Cooking also kills harmful bacteria and parasites, improving health. This revolution in nutrition is believed to have had major evolutionary consequences. By outsourcing part of the digestive process to the fire, our ancestors could support a smaller, less energy-intensive gut, freeing up precious metabolic energy that could be redirected to fuel the growth of our most demanding organ, the brain. The hearth was also a crucial technological tool. As early as 164,000 years ago in South Africa, humans were using fire to carefully heat-treat stone like silkrete. Heating the stone to a precise temperature changes its internal structure, making it easier to flake and allowing for the creation of much finer, sharper, and more durable blades and points. This pyrotechnology demonstrates an incredible degree of control and sophisticated, multi-step planning. Fire was also used to shape the world's first ceramics. This wasn't pottery for storage, but fired clay art, like the stunningly detailed Venus figurines from Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, which were sculpted from a mixture of clay and powdered bone, and then fired in a kiln-like hearth around 29,000 years ago. Beyond these practical functions, the hearth was the nucleus of the social group, the gravitational center around which the community orbited. Archaeological excavations of Paleolithic sites consistently show hearths as the focal point of activity, with clusters of discarded tools, manufacturing debris, and food remains radiating outwards from them. This was the place where the day's bounty was brought to be shared, where tools were made and repaired, where children were watched, and where the group came together. It was here, in the warmth and light of the fire, that the human social and cognitive environment was fundamentally re-engineered. Before the mastery of fire, life was dictated by the sun. The night was a time of peril. Fire created a new, safe sphere for social time. This new niche for interaction created a powerful selective pressure for more complex communication. The practical chatter of the hunt gave way to the need to fill the evening hours with storytelling, planning for the next day, negotiating social rules, and reinforcing myths. Many researchers believe this nightly gathering around the fire was a key driver in the evolution of complex language. Furthermore, cooking and sharing food at a central point transformed eating from an individual, on-the-go primate behavior into a communal, ritualized human event. This act reinforced the critical values of reciprocity, fairness, and social bonding. The hearth, therefore, was not just a tool for survival. It was the very crucible in which the defining elements of our humanity, complex language, intricate social rules, and shared culture, were forged. Part 2. The human fabric living together. Survival in the Paleolithic was not an individual endeavor. It was a team sport. The success of Homo sapiens was predicated not just on their ability to find food or make tools, but on their unparalleled capacity for cooperation. The daily challenges of life were met by a social fabric woven from threads of kinship, alliance, and shared identity. This section moves from the individual struggle for calories to the collective strategies for organization, cooperation, and navigating the complex landscape of relationships with both neighbors and strangers. The social world, from band to tribe, the scale of Paleolithic society was profoundly intimate. The fundamental unit of social life was the band, a small, mobile group typically composed of 15 to 50 individuals. This group size, often representing just a few extended family units, was a practical necessity dictated by the carrying capacity of the environment. A larger group would quickly exhaust the local resources of wild plants and game, forcing it to move on or split apart. Anthropologists estimate that, depending on the richness of the environment, a single band would have required a territory ranging from over 7 to more than 70 square miles to meet its basic needs. However, these small bands were not isolated islands of humanity adrift in a vast wilderness. They were nodes in a much larger social network. Multiple bands were connected through ties of kinship, language, and shared cultural practices, forming a maximal band, or what is sometimes referred to as a tribe. These larger metagroups could encompass anywhere from 175 to 500 people, creating a multi-level social structure that was both fluid and resilient. Individuals and families might move between different bands within this larger network, responding to seasonal resource availability or social dynamics. The glue that held this entire structure together was kinship. In a world without formal laws or institutions, kinship was the primary organizing principle of society. It dictated social roles, mutual obligations, the rules of resource sharing, and the formation of alliances. The trust inherent in family relationships was the bedrock of the cooperation necessary for survival in a harsh and unpredictable world. A critical function of this larger social network was to provide a pool of potential mates. Living and reproducing within a tiny band of 25 people would quickly lead to dangerous levels of inbreeding. To avoid this, early humans practiced exogamy, the rule of marrying or reproducing outside of one's immediate group. Stunning evidence for this systematic practice comes from the 34,000-year-old burial site of Sungir in Russia. Genetic analysis of several individuals buried together with lavish grave goods revealed that they were not closely related. This indicates that they belonged to a group where individuals, likely both men and women, systematically left their home bands to find partners in others. This practice was not only essential for maintaining genetic diversity, but was also a powerful mechanism for building and maintaining peaceful alliances between different bands, creating a web of in-laws and shared descendants that linked the entire regional population. This social structure fostered a profoundly egalitarian ethos. The nomadic lifestyle of most hunter-gatherer groups prevented the accumulation of private property and material wealth, the primary basis for social hierarchy in later societies. Status was not based on what you owned, but on who you were and what you could do. Age, experience, skill in hunting or healing, strength of personality, or wisdom conferred influence and respect, but not permanent authority. While respected elders or particularly successful hunters might lead a hunt or offer counsel, decision-making was likely a more collective and consensual process. This multi-level social structure of nested bands within a larger tribal network was not merely a passive social arrangement. It was a sophisticated and highly successful evolutionary strategy for managing risk. A single, isolated band of 25 people is extraordinarily vulnerable. A localized drought could wither their plant foods. A disease could wipe out key members. A failed hunting season could lead to starvation, or a disastrous encounter with a predator could cripple the group. By maintaining a fluid and interconnected network of allied bands, our ancestors created a powerful social safety net. If one band fell on hard times, they could call upon kin in a neighboring band for support, gain temporary access to their territory and resources, or even merge with them until conditions improved. This network also functioned as a marketplace for information, allowing crucial knowledge and new technological innovations, a better way to haft a spear point, a new source of high-quality stone, to spread rapidly through the population. This social system was, in essence, our ancestors' form of insurance, a portfolio of diversified social assets that provided the resilience and flexibility needed to survive an unpredictable world. It was a key ingredient in the secret sauce of Homo sapiens' success. Rethinking roles. Man the hunter, woman the gatherer? For much of the 20th century, our understanding of Paleolithic social dynamics was dominated by the man the hunter, woman the gatherer model. This framework, popularized in the 1960s, posited a strict and universal division of labor based on sex. Men, being stronger and more expendable, ventured out on dangerous hunts for big game, while women, tethered by the demands of pregnancy and childcare, remained in the safer vicinity of the camp, gathering plants and tending to domestic chores. This model not only presented a rigid view of gender roles but also implicitly valued the male contribution of hunting as more dynamic, risky, and evolutionarily significant than the supposedly more passive female contribution of gathering. However, a wave of recent scholarship, fueled by new analytical techniques, a reevaluation of old evidence, and a critical awareness of modern biases, has powerfully challenged this simplistic and hierarchical cliché. The evidence now points towards a far more flexible, complementary, and egalitarian system of labor. First, there is no compelling physiological reason to exclude women from the hunt. While men do have an advantage in activities requiring short bursts of power, like throwing, women's physiology, particularly the influence of the hormone estrogen, gives them a distinct advantage in endurance. Estrogen promotes fat metabolism, providing muscles with a more sustained energy source, and helps regulate muscle breakdown, making women more resistant to fatigue over long periods. This makes them exceptionally well-suited for persistence hunting, a technique that involves running prey down over many hours or days until it collapses from exhaustion, a strategy thought to be a key human adaptation. Ethnographic studies of modern foraging groups, such as the Agta of the Philippines, and direct archaeological evidence, like the 9,000-year-old burial of a female hunter with her toolkit in the Andes of Peru, confirm that women have been and are active and successful hunters. Second, the logic of survival in a small band argues against a rigid division of labor. In a community of only a few dozen people facing constant existential threats, it would be a deeply inefficient and risky strategy to sideline half of the able-bodied adult population from the critical task of acquiring high-calorie food. it is far more likely that roles were fluid and pragmatic. While there may have been general tendencies, for example, men more frequently undertaking long-distance hunts for large game, and women, especially those with young children, focusing on foraging closer to camp, these were almost certainly not inflexible rules. Communal hunts, which involved driving herds, would have required the participation of everyone, men, women, and older children, each playing a vital role. Third, we must recognize the inherent bias in the archaeological record. Stone tools, often associated with men's work of hunting and butchery, preserved for millennia. In contrast, the technologies often associated with women's work, baskets and bags woven from plant fibers, nets, slings, and leather goods, are made of organic materials that rarely survive. This incredible shrinking prehistoric woman phenomenon creates a distorted picture, an archaeological illusion of male dominance in the technological sphere. In reality, the work of processing food, preparing hides, sewing tailored clothing with bone needles, building shelters, and managing the camp was equally vital and technologically complex. Finally, the mortuary evidence from the Upper Paleolithic provides some of our most compelling data. Across Europe, burials from this period generally show no significant difference in the manner of treatment or the quantity and quality of grave goods deposited with males and females. High-status individuals of both sexes were buried with lavish offerings. The recent DNA confirmation of a 10th-century Viking warrior leader, buried with a full suite of weapons, as female serves as a powerful modern corrective to our assumptions about the past. The evidence from the deeper past suggests that social status was earned through an individual's contributions and personal qualities, not predetermined by their sex. The most plausible model for Paleolithic life is one of a flexible and complementary partnership, where all members contributed essential skills and resources to the collective survival of the group. Distant strangers, networks of exchange and conflict. The social world of early humans extended far beyond the immediate horizon. Bands were connected to one another, forming vast networks that were conduits for goods, ideas, genes, and, at times, violence. Life was a complex negotiation between cooperation with allies and competition with rivals, and the archaeological record reveals both the bright and dark sides of these intergroup relations. The existence of long-distance trade or exchange networks is one of the most striking indicators of the complexity of Paleolithic societies. This was not trade in the modern, commercial sense, but a system of reciprocal exchange that moved valuable materials across immense distances, cementing social alliances along the way. High-quality raw materials for toolmaking were a key commodity. Obsidian, a volcanic glass that produces an incredibly sharp edge, was sourced from specific, limited locations and transported hundreds of kilometers to sites where it was used. Similarly, beautiful seashells from the Mediterranean coast and the Atlantic have been found at inland sites deep in France and Germany, where they were used as personal ornaments. Perhaps the most significant trade item was ochre, a naturally occurring iron oxide pigment, usually red or yellow, as early as 300,000 years ago, and becoming widespread by 120,000 years ago. Humans were mining and trading ochre over vast distances. These lumps of color were used as crayons for drawing, as body paint for ritual and social signaling, and as a symbolic element in burials. The fact that groups would go to such great lengths to acquire these materials indicates they held a powerful symbolic and social value that went far beyond their practical utility. These networks were the arteries of the Paleolithic world, pumping not just goods, but also information about new technologies, cultural innovations, and, as we have seen, mating partners connecting disparate communities into a larger, shared cultural web. However, this interconnected world was not always peaceful. The same resources that could be traded could also be fought over. Competition for the best hunting grounds, reliable water sources, productive plant patches, or access to women could easily spill over into violent conflict. The skeletal remains of our ancestors bear the grim testament to this darker side of human nature. Archaeologists have found numerous examples of individuals from the Paleolithic with injuries that are unmistakably the result of violence. Skulls crushed by blunt force trauma, projectile points from spears or arrows embedded in bone, and perifractures on the forearms, a classic defensive injury sustained while trying to ward off a blow. While sporadic, individual violence was likely a feature of human life from the beginning, the evidence for organized, group-level conflict, what we would call warfare, becomes chillingly clear in the late Upper Paleolithic. At Nadaruk, a site near Lake Turkana in Kenya dated to approximately 10,000 years ago, archaeologists uncovered the remains of at least 27 individuals: men, women, one of whom was pregnant, and children. They had not been buried. They had been massacred. The skeletons show horrific injuries: crushed skulls, broken hands and knees, and stone projectile tips lodged in chests and necks. This was not a brawl. It was the systematic annihilation of a small band of foragers. A similarly brutal scene is found at Jebel Sahaba in Sudan, where burials from around 13,000 years ago show that nearly half the individuals had died violently from projectile wounds, evidence of recurrent, lethal warfare. These violent encounters were likely driven by desperation and competition, perhaps exacerbated by the dramatic climate shifts at the end of the last ice age that would have placed immense pressure on resources. The very social networks that facilitated peaceful exchange and alliance building also defined the boundaries between us and them. These networks created a social landscape of known allies and potential enemies. During times of plenty, interactions with other groups could be positive, focused on trade and marriage. But during times of stress, the incentive could flip. The other group becomes a competitor to be eliminated, and their territory, food stores, and people become resources to be seized through raiding. The archaeological record, with its simultaneous evidence of beautiful, traded seashells and brutally murdered families, reflects this inherent and enduring duality of human social life. Peace and war were not separate states but potential outcomes of the same complex system of intergroup relations. Part 3. The Inner World, the Dawn of Modern Consciousness. Beyond the daily struggle for food and the complexities of social life, there lies the most enigmatic realm of the Paleolithic experience: the inner world of the mind. What did our ancestors believe? How did they see themselves and their place in the cosmos? We cannot excavate a thought or a feeling, but the archaeological record is littered with the fossilized evidence of cognition. The deliberate shape of a tool, the layout of a camp, the careful burial of a loved one, and, most spectacularly, the explosion of art in the Upper Paleolithic are all windows into the dawn of the modern human psyche. This was a world being filled with symbols, rituals, and beliefs for the first time. A world of symbols, the first art. Beginning around 40,000 years ago, something extraordinary happens in the archaeological record. While the roots of symbolic thought are much deeper, seen in the use of ochre and simple engravings in the Middle Paleolithic for over 100,000 years, the Upper Paleolithic witnesses a veritable flourishing of artistic and symbolic expression, a creative explosion that transformed human culture. This art took two main forms: small, portable objects and spectacular paintings on the walls of deep caves. The portable, or mobiliary, art of the period consisted of small sculptures and decorated objects carved from stone, bone, ivory, and antler. These items could be carried by nomadic groups and likely served as personal adornments, ritual objects, or status symbols. The most famous and enigmatic of these are the Venus figurines. Found across Europe from France to Siberia, these are small, often faceless female figures with hugely exaggerated breasts, stomachs, and hips. The Venus of Willendorf, a limestone statuette from Austria dated to about 25,000 to 30,000 years ago, is the most iconic example. The meaning of these figurines is hotly debated. Were they universal symbols of fertility and beauty, a kind of mother goddess? A recent theory, linking their distribution to proximity to glaciers, suggests they may represent an idealized female body type for surviving Ice Age scarcity, with body fat being a crucial resource for carrying a pregnancy to term. Another intriguing hypothesis proposes they were self-portraits, carved by women looking down at their own bodies, which would explain the distorted proportions and lack of facial features. Even more breathtaking is the stationary, or parietal, art found on the walls of deep, dark caves. In sites like Chauvet, c. 32,000 BP, Lascaux, c. 17,000 BP, and Altamira, c. 15,000 BP, early modern humans created a stunning bestiary of the Ice Age world, using pigments made from charcoal, ochre, and other minerals mixed with binders like animal fat or water. They painted and engraved images of bison, horses, mammoths, aurochs, and lions with a remarkable blend of naturalism and abstraction. These were not the animals they typically ate, suggesting the art's purpose was more than just a menu. Human figures are rare and are usually depicted as simple stick figures or as strange, composite human-animal beings, known as therianthropes, like the famous sorcerer of Les Trois Frères cave. Alongside these animal figures, the cave walls are covered in geometric signs, dots, lines, zigzags, and more complex shapes. Archaeologist Genevieve von Petzinger has documented 32 specific symbols that appear repeatedly in caves all across Europe over a period of 30,000 years. This remarkable consistency suggests they were not random doodles but a shared, conventionalized system of meaning. A recent, compelling theory proposes that these marks may represent a form of proto-writing or notational system. By analyzing the sequences of dots and lines associated with animal figures, researchers have argued they form a lunar calendar used to track the mating and birthing seasons of key prey animals, with the Y symbol representing the act of giving birth. The question of why our ancestors descended into these dangerous, pitch-black caves to create this art has generated numerous theories. The early idea of art for art's sake, that they were simply decorating their living spaces, is now largely dismissed, as the art is found in the most remote and inaccessible parts of the caves, far from any signs of domestic life. The hunting magic theory suggests that by depicting an animal being wounded by a spear, the artists believed they could magically ensure success in a real hunt. A more powerful and widely supported theory points to shamanism. The deep, dark, silent, and acoustically resonant caves may have been seen as portals to a spirit world. The geometric signs bear a striking resemblance to entoptic phenomena, the patterns the human brain generates during altered states of consciousness, which can be induced by sensory deprivation, chanting, or hallucinogens. The therianthropic figures could represent shamans in the act of transforming into their spirit animals during a trance. The art, in this view, is a record of these visionary journeys. Finally, the art may have served as a sophisticated system for storing and transmitting complex ecological and mythological information, a visual textbook for passing down the group's collective knowledge to the next generation. Ultimately, these interpretations are not mutually exclusive. Paleolithic art was likely a technology with multiple functions. Its creation required a profound cognitive leap, the ability to hold an abstract concept in the mind and translate it into a durable external form. The rituals that undoubtedly accompanied its creation in the depths of the caves would have been powerful communal events, reinforcing the group's social bonds, myths, and shared reality. The art was a tool for structuring thought, for externalizing the mind, for creating and navigating a symbolic cosmos, and for binding society together. It was a technology as vital for cognitive and social survival as the stone axe was for physical survival. Love and death in the Stone Age, ritual and belief. Few human behaviors are as profoundly symbolic as the way we treat our dead. The act of intentional burial is a uniquely human practice, a clear line drawn between us and the rest of the animal kingdom. It appears in the archaeological record as early as 120,000 years ago, practiced by both early Homo sapiens at sites like Skul and Kafsa in Israel and by their Neanderthal contemporaries. These early burials, where bodies were carefully placed in dug pits, sometimes accompanied by simple grave goods, are our first tangible evidence of ritual and belief surrounding death. The details of these burials offer tantalizing clues into the minds of our ancestors. The inclusion of grave goods, items like well-made stone tools, animal bones, perhaps representing food for a journey, and personal ornaments like seashell beads, strongly suggests a belief in some form of afterlife. The deceased was not simply being disposed of. They were being equipped for what came next. The frequent and deliberate use of red ochre is particularly striking. Bodies and graves were often coated in this vibrant, blood-colored pigment, an act widely interpreted as a powerful life-giving symbol, perhaps intended to restore vitality to the corpse or to protect it on its journey into the next world. The position of the body itself can be telling. Many were laid in a flexed or fetal position, as if sleeping, which may imply a view of death not as a final end, but as a transitional state from which one might eventually awaken. The existence of these rituals is not just evidence of abstract belief. It is powerful evidence of emotion. The immense effort involved in digging a grave and performing a ritual for a deceased member of the group speaks to a profound sense of loss. It implies that the individual was not seen as an interchangeable unit, but as a unique and irreplaceable person whose memory the survivors wish to honor. This is the archaeology of grief. This emotional capacity is further illuminated by evidence of compassion and care for the living. The Paleolithic record is replete with examples of individuals who suffered from severe injuries or debilitating congenital conditions yet survived for many years, long after they would have been able to fend for themselves. The famous Old Man of La Chapelle-aux-Saints was a Neanderthal who lived to an advanced age despite suffering from crippling arthritis that would have made him a slow and dependent member of his group. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, one individual survived for years after suffering a crushing blow to the head that likely blinded him in one eye and paralyzed one side of his body. These individuals could not have survived without the sustained, long-term care of their companions. This is undeniable evidence for altruism and compassion, a deep-seated emotional commitment to others that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years and formed the very basis of human social collaboration. The practice of intentional burial, therefore, marks a critical cognitive and emotional threshold in human evolution. Most animals abandon their dead. When our ancestors began to deliberately remove their deceased from the living space, place them in a specially prepared location, and furnish them with personal items, they were doing something revolutionary. They were making a statement that this was not just a body, but a person whose unique identity persisted beyond the moment of death. The burial is a monument to that individual's life and the relationships they held. In this sense, the archaeology of death is also the archaeology of the birth of the individual as a powerful social and symbolic concept, a concept that required the survivors to bridge the gap between the living and the dead through ritual, memory, and love. The symbolic species, the evolution of mind and language. The story of the Paleolithic is ultimately the story of the evolution of the human mind. While we cannot directly access the thoughts of our ancestors, the entire archaeological record serves as a collection of fossils of the mind. Every object, from the simplest stone flake to the most elaborate cave painting, is a physical manifestation of the cognitive processes that created it. Planning, memory, spatial reasoning, and symbolic thought. The puzzle of language evolution is central to this story. Language itself does not fossilize, but its presence can be inferred from behaviors that would be nearly impossible without it. The level of planning and coordination required for a communal hunt, the transmission of the complex, multi-step procedures for making a levallois point or detoxifying a plant, and the creation and maintenance of a shared symbolic culture of art and ritual all strongly imply the existence of a sophisticated communication system, whether a complex proto-language or fully modern language. The intense sociality of Paleolithic life, centered around the hearth and maintained across vast networks of alliances, would have created immense selective pressure for the evolution of language as the ultimate tool for social bonding. The emergence of a modern sense of self and identity can also be traced in the material record. One of the most powerful indicators is the appearance of personal ornamentation. The creation and wearing of beads, made from seashells, animal teeth, or ivory, dates back over 100,000 years. This seemingly simple act is cognitively profound. To decorate the body is to have a concept of the self as a social object, an entity that can be presented to and perceived by others. It is an expression of personal and group identity. The later development of art that may be self-referential, such as the Venus figurines interpreted as self-portraits, and burial practices that honor the unique life of an individual further point to a fully modern sense of selfhood. Even the elusive world of emotion can be approached through archaeology. While we can never know precisely how a specific individual felt, we can identify the material expressions of what some scholars call emotional communities, groups that share ways of valuing and displaying certain emotions. The consistent, long-term care for the sick and injured is a powerful material signature of compassion. The immense effort and artistry invested in non-utilitarian objects and rituals, from the intricate carvings on an antler to the lavish burials of the dead, suggest deep emotional investments of grief, awe, and reverence. The very act of creating something beautiful for its own sake speaks to an aesthetic sense and the capacity for joy. This brings us to a final, crucial understanding of our deep past. The evolution of the modern human mind was not a simple, linear process where bigger brains automatically led to better tools and more complex societies. Instead, it was a dynamic and recursive feedback loop where culture and cognition continuously shaped one another. The very act of making a complex tool, with its required sequence of precise actions, reinforces the neural pathways for planning, problem-solving, and fine motor control. Living in a larger, more fluid social network selects for enhanced social intelligence, the ability to track relationships, infer others' intentions, and navigate a complex web of cooperation and competition. Creating and interpreting a system of symbolic art requires and develops the capacity for abstract thought. Once a symbol for bison exists, the mind can manipulate that concept in new ways, divorced from the physical animal itself. In this view, human culture, our tools, our social structures, our symbols, was not just a product of our evolved brains. It was a primary engine of our cognitive evolution. Tools made minds, social life made minds, and symbols made minds in a continuous, reinforcing cycle that ultimately produced the complex, creative, and profoundly social consciousness that defines our species. Conclusion: our deepest roots. The daily life of an early Homo sapiens was a tapestry woven from threads of immense challenge and remarkable ingenuity. To wake each morning in the Paleolithic was to face a world of profound uncertainty, a world dictated by the whims of a volatile climate and populated by formidable beasts. Survival was a relentless, moment-to-moment negotiation with this environment, a constant cycle of energy expenditure in the pursuit of the calories needed to see the next dawn. Yet, what emerges from the deep past is not a story of mere, brutal survival, but one of astonishing resilience and adaptability. Our ancestors met these challenges with a sophisticated toolkit that extended far beyond stone and bone. Their greatest tools were cognitive and social. They possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of their landscapes, transforming poisonous plants into sustenance and tracking the movements of mighty herds. They developed technologies of projectile weaponry and cooperative hunting that allowed them to compete in a world of giants. They mastered fire, and in the circle of the hearth's light, they forged the bonds of community, the rules of sharing, and the complexities of language. They built societies not on wealth or power, but on the intricate and resilient scaffolding of kinship, creating multi-layered networks that served as a safety net against the unpredictability of life. Within these groups, they developed flexible and complementary roles, where the contributions of all members were vital to the collective good. They engaged with the world beyond their immediate family, building vast networks of exchange for goods and ideas, even as they navigated the ever-present threat of violent conflict with rival groups. Most profoundly, they began to populate their world with meaning. In the deep, dark silence of caves, they painted their cosmos into existence. In the careful burial of their dead, they articulated their beliefs about life, death, and the enduring value of the individual. They adorned their bodies, expressing a newfound sense of self and identity. They cared for their sick and injured, revealing a capacity for compassion that is one of the most fundamental hallmarks of our humanity. The story of the Paleolithic is the story of a dynamic feedback loop, where the challenges of the world spurred technological, social, and cognitive innovations, and these innovations, in turn, reshaped the human mind and opened up new possibilities for living. The daily struggles of the Ice Age forged the species that we are today. Our deep-seated need for social connection, our innate capacity for symbolic thought and storytelling, our reliance on technology to solve problems, and our complex, often fraught, relationship with the natural world are not recent developments. They are the echoes of the Ice Age, the enduring legacy of our ancestors' daily lives, and the foundational pillars of the modern human experience.